Aphorism 233. It betrays corruption of the instincts, quite apart from the fact that it betrays bad taste when a woman appeals precisely to Madame Rilon, or Madame de Stael, or Monsieur George Sand, as it's something in favor of woman as such, where thereby demonstrated. Among men the above named are the three comic women, as such nothing more, and precisely the best involuntary counter-arguments against emancipation in female autocracy. Aphorism 234. Stupidity in the kitchen, woman as cook, the dreadful thoughtlessness with which the nourishment of the female in the family and the master of the house is provided for. Woman does not understand what food means, and she wants to be the cook. If woman were a thinking creature, she would have been the cook for thousands of years, surely have had to discover the major facts of physiology, and likewise gained possession of the art of healing. It is through bad female cooks, through the complete absence of reason in the kitchen, that the evolution of man has been longest retarded and most harmed. Even today, things are hardly any better. A lecture for high school girls. Aphorism 235. There are fortunate turns of the spirit. There are impingraments. A little handful of words in which an entire culture, a whole society suddenly crystallize. Among these, Madame de Lambert's remarked to her son, Homme aimé, ne vous permettez jamais de le fallait de vous grand vivant grand plaisir. The most motherly and prudent remark, incidentally, that was ever addressed to a son. Aphorism 236. That which Dante and Goethe believed of woman, the former when he sang Elle guerriera, Suso, de en lilai. The latter when he translated it, the eternal womanly draws us upward. I do not doubt that every nobler woman will still resist this brief, but precisely what she believes of the eternal manly. Aphorism 237. 7 Proverbs for women. How the slowest tedium flies when a man comes on his knees. Age and scientific thought give even virtue some support. Sober garb and total muteness dress a woman with austereness. Who has brought me luck today? God, and my courtier. Young, a carven decked about. Old, a dragon sallies out. Noble name, a leg that's fine, men as well. Oh, where he mind. Few words, much meaning, slippery ground, many a poor she ours has found. Men have hitherto treated women like birds, which have strayed down to them from the heights, as something more delicate, more fragile, more savage, stranger, sweeter, soulful, but as something which has to be caged up so that it shall not fly away. Aphorism 238. To blunder over the fundamental problem of man and woman, to deny there the most abysmal antagonism, and the necessity of the eternal hostile tension, perhaps to dream here of equal rights, equal education, equal claims and duties. This is a typical sign of shallow-mindedness, and a thinker who has proved himself to be shallow on this dangerous point, shallow of instinct, may be regarded as suspect in general, more as portrayed, as found out. He will probably be too short for all the fundamental questions of life, those of life in the future too, incapable of any depth. On the other hand, a man who has depth in his spirit as well as in his desires, and also that depth of benevolence which is capable of hardness and severity, and is easily confused with them, can think of a woman only in a oriental way, He must conceive of woman as a possession, as property with lock and key, as something predestined for service and attaining her fulfillment in service. In this matter, he must take his stand on the tremendous intelligence of Asia, on Asia's superiority of instinct, as the Greeks formerly did. They were Asia's best heirs and pupils, and, as is well known, from Homer to the age of Pericles, with the increase of their culture and and amplitude of their powers, also became step by step more strict with women, in short, more oriental. How necessary, how logical, how humanly desirable even this was, let each ponder for himself. Aphorism 239. The weak sex has in no age been treated by men with such respect as it is in our own. That pertains to the democratic inclination and fundamental taste, as does disrespectfulness to old age. It is any wonder if this respect is immediately abused? She wants more, she learns to demand. In the end, she finds this tribute of respect almost offensive. She would prefer competition for rights, indeed, a real stand up fight. Enough. Woman loses in modesty. Let us add at once that she also loses in taste. She unlearns fear of man, but the woman who unlearns fear sacrifices her most womanly instincts. That woman should venture out when the fear inspiring in man, let us put more precisely and say the man in man is no longer desired and developed is fair enough, almost comprehensible enough. What is harder to comprehend is that, through precisely this fact, woman degenerates. This is what is happening today. Let us not deceive ourselves. Wherever the spirit of industry has triumphed over the military and aristocratic spirit, woman now aspires to the economic and legal independence of a clerk. Woman as clerk stands inscribed on the portal of, of modern society, now taking shape. As she thus seizes new rights, looks to become master, and inscribes the progress of woman on her flags and banners. The reverse is happening with dreadful clarity. Woman is retrogressing. Since the French Revolution, the influence of woman in Europe has grown less in the same proportion as her rights, and claims have grown greater, and the emancipation of woman, insofar as it has been demanded and advanced by women themselves, and not only by man shallow pets, is thus revealed as a noteworthy symptom of the growing enfeeblement and blunting of the most feminine instincts. There is stupidity in the movement, an almost emasculated stupidity, of which real woman, who is also clever, would have to be ashamed from the very heart of having masculinity in her. To lose her sense for the ground on which she is most sure of victory, to neglect to practice the use of her own proper weapons, to let her go before the man, perhaps even to the extent of producing a book, where, formerly, she kept herself in check, and in subtle, cunning humility, to seek with virtuous assurance to destroy man's belief that a fundamentally different ideal is wrapped up in woman, that there is something eternally, necessarily feminine, emphatically and loquaciously to talk man out of the idea that woman has to be maintained, cared for, protected, indulged like a delicate, strangely wild, and often agreeable domestic animal. The clumsy and indignant parade of all slavery and bondage, that woman's position in the order of society is hitherto entitled and still entitled, as if slavery were an counter-argument and not rather a condition of every higher culture, of every enhancement of culture. What does all this mean if not a crumbling of the feminine instinct, a defeminizing? To be sure, there are sufficient idiotic friends and corrupters of woman among the learned asses of the male sex, who advise woman to defeminize herself in this fashion, and to imitate all the stupidities of which man in Europe European manliness is sick. Would like to reduce woman to the level of general education, if not that the newspaper reading and playing of politics? Here and there they even want to turn women into free spirits and illiterates, as if a woman without pity would not be something utterly repellent or ludicrous to a profound and godless man. Almost everywhere her nerves are being shattered by the most morbid and dangerous of all the varieties of music, our latest German music, and she is being rendered more and more hysterically with every day that passes, and more incapable of her first and last profession, which is to bear strong children. There is a desire to make her, in general, more cultivated, and as they say, to make the weak sex strong through culture, as if history did not teach in the most emphatic manner possible that making human beings cultivated and making them stronger, that is to say, enfeebling, fragmenting, contaminating the force of the will, has always gone hand in hand, and that the world's most powerful and influential women, almost recently the mother of Napoleon, owed their power and ascendancy over men precisely to the force of their will, and not the schoolmasters. That in woman which inspires respect and fundamentally fear in her nature, which is most natural than that of a man. Her genuine cunning, beast of prey suppleness, the tiger's claws beneath the glove, the naivety of her egoism, her inedu- ineducability, in, ineducability, and inner savagery, and now incomprehensibility, capricious, and prowling her desires and virtues are that which all fear notwithstanding evokes pity for this dangerous and beautiful capped woman, is that she appears to be more afflicted, more vulnerable, more in need of love, and more condemned to disappointment than any other animal. Fear and pity it is with these feelings that man has hitherto stood before woman, always with one foot in tragedy, which lacerates as its delights. What? What is this now over with? And is woman now being deprived of her enchantment? Is woman slowly being made boring? Oh, Europe! Europe! We know that horned beast which always attracted you most, which again and again threatens you with danger. Your ancient fable could once again become history. Once again a monstrous stupidity could master you and carry you off. And no good concealed within it, no, merely an idea, a modern idea. Welcome, everyone, to the final episode of Part 7, Our Virtues. We'll concentrate this episode on two aphorisms because the first five aphorisms are shortened and nuanced to the final two aphorisms. So we'll begin with 238. He says that the blunder of the fundamental problem of woman and man, it becomes a abysmal antagonism of a necessity of this hostile tension. He says it becomes in a dream of equal rights, equal education, claims, and duties. This is the typical sign of shallow mindedness in a thinker who has provided himself to be shallow on a dangerous point. Shallow of instinct, aka a democratic approach to egalitarianism, to be reserved, to have a form of what Nietzsche would use Chinese and Christianize an individual. Chinese in this sense of unity. Well, not unity, but uniformity, and Christianity in a form of love of one's neighbor, aka conditioned morality to forgive individuals. While at the While at the same time, it's a early indignant sign of simple-mindedness and plebeian values. That's why it becomes shallow, and shallowing slash suffocating the instincts to flourish in a unequal natural environment. He continues forward that this becomes a betrayed as it is found out that he would probably be too short of the fundamental questions of life. Those of life are incapable of those questions and to the future have any capability or lack of capability of any depth. On the other hand, man who has depth in his spirit as well as in his desires, and also the depth of benevolence, has the capability of hardness and severity, which is easily confused with what a woman thinks in an oriented way. Forewarned, if I didn't say the previous time, this is derogatory to women, but at the same time, there's truth in between what Nietzsche's prejudice or resentment, as people immediately say. Another individual said of these final two aphorisms of part 7 is this is a contradiction to part 1, the prejudices of the philosophers, implying of Nietzsche's prejudice to women. To a degree, that individual is correct because of Nietzsche's failed and blunder path of love in his life. But nonetheless, he's presenting truth amidst his irascible fury of writing. And this is relevant to today of how both men and women don't comprehend one another. They are instilled with indifferent emotions, but with different tempos, whilst never ceasing to comprehend one another. Exceptionally when emasculinized man and defeminized women, to a degree, stubborn women, don't comprehend the severity and hardship of a man's life. Which shows that once how shall a nation flourish if they frown upon the masculinity of a man once he becomes unknown, unused, and dismayed, which leaves an an abyss or void or a slot for someone to fill, which women have involuntarily and cunningly, well, not involuntarily, but voluntarily and cunningly, uh, position themselves in a hardship and severe role, which blunders every single time. That's why Nietzsche, again with the warning of his um, defamation, is at the same time realizing that women lack the nuance and and the valor of at the same level as a man. And he'll continue forward that he must conceive a woman as a property, as a possession, with a lock and key, predestined for service and attaining her fulfillment in service. He should have the tremendous intelligence of Asia, on Asia's superiority of instinct, as the Greeks formerly did. They were Asia's best heirs and pupils. And as if is well known, from Homer to the age of Pericles, with the increase of their culture and the altitude, not altitude, but amplitude of their powers, also became step by step more strict with women and more, in short, more oriental. aka aka creating a biological hierarchy instinct. To a degree, there's truth inside that, with with a sign of obstinacy or stubbornness on Nietzsche's part. But nonetheless, he said, how necessary, how logical, how humanly desirable even in this way, let each of us ponder for himself. Because he shows that from the ages of Homer to Pericles, that the increase of a amplified culture existed because of their emphatic sophistication of of their material, physiological, and social conditions of flourishing in that time, including the women. Inc- uh, this is relevant to the Spartans, who rarely taught their women to fight, but in rare situations, they taught their women a light and passive form of sports, athleticism, and boxing. That's where he observes the blunder and fundamental issue among this tension. Now it culminates to the final aphorism of part 7, where he describes verse as the weak sex has no age, and no age has been treated by men with such respect as it is in ours. This pertains of a democratic inclination and fundamental taste so disrespectful to old ages, is it any wonder that if this respect is immediately abused, we it is relevant to how the the repre- uh, the repressive ideology of a benign view of nature, which includes this democratic inclination or a democratic idiosyncrasy that ponders and desires to rule, to inflict a form of mechanical and senseless operation on individuals, aka rendering them as equal, which would Nietzsche say is the litter of democracy from, say, for example, the French Enlightenment or Revolution. Revolutions, period. Philosophy, science, art, religions, politics, if you involve that with socialism, communism, capitalism, anarchism, etc., etc. Utilitarianism, for one example. Romanticism heralded women among their tenets of innocence, instincts, arts, and humility, etc., etc. He says she wants more. She learns to demand. In the end, she finds this tribute to respect most offensive. She would prefer competition for rights, need of a real stand-up fight. Enough. Woman loses in modesty, aka a drastic separation from their feminine nature. There's a quote from Sigmund Freud where he said, "Women should soft man and not weaken him." Let us add at once that she also loses in taste. True. She unlearns. I have to remember not to agree here. This is me analyzing, not me agreeing. And another warning is the red pill, alt right, and sensitive left misinterpret what Nietzsche is saying among this inequality of this advocacy for inequality. It's not of segregation nor genocide nor murdering individuals. It's recognizing a biological uh, inequality among people. This is where he would say, let us add at once that she also loses in taste. She unlearns the fear of man because of how feminized this man is, or a masculinized woman, to say. But the woman who unlearns fear sacrifices her most womanly instincts, as I said. That woman should venture out when the fear inspiring in man, let us put it more precisely and say, the man in man is no longer desired and developed. It is far enough, also comprehensible enough that what is harder to comprehend is that, through precisely this fact, woman degenerates. That sentence or emphatic sentence describes everything of how a man isn't truly a man to reverse the woman and woman. was thinking of something earlier, but I think we're approaching that sentence of what I'm thinking of. This is what happens today. Let us not deceive ourselves. Wherever the spirit of industry has triumphed over the military and aristocratic spirit, woman now aspires to the economic and legal independence of a clerk. Woman as clerk stands inscribed on the portal of the modern society now taking shape. Clerk in the sense of direction, guidance, and it's guiding in the opposite direction to this, in the opposite direction of what Nietzsche would say. This is not what the prevailing instincts desire in an aristocratic spirit, but their form of of autocratic and militant spirit of a woman is now aspire to legal and economic equality. As she thus seizes new rights, looks to become master, and inscribes the progress of woman on her flags and banners, the reverse is happening with dreadful clarity. Woman is retrogressing. It, it would say, too, in the next one that the French Revolution and had the influence of woman in Europe has grown less of the same proportion as her rights and claims have have grown greater in the emancipation of women insofar as it has been demanded and advanced by women themselves. Blunt, frank, and sincere of what Nietzsche is saying. It thus revealed as a noteworthy symptom of the growing enfeeblement and blunting of the most feminine instincts. He says that this is a stupidity movement, where she loses her senses for the ground on which she is sure of victory, to neglect to practice the use of her own proper weapons, to let herself go before man, perhaps even to the extent of producing a book, where formerly she kept herself in check, and in subtle, cunning humility to seek with virtuous assurance to destroy man's belief that a fundamentally different ideal is wrapped up in woman, that is eternally, necessarily feminine, emphatically and loquaciously to talk man out of the idea that woman has to be maintained, cared for, protected, indulged, like a delicate, strangely wild, and often agreeable domestic animal. He says this is a form of defeminization. AKA, there's a quote from him in a different work where what does a man desire? Danger. And what is the most dangerous thing? It was a woman, because they become the most dangerous, playful thing. And then he adds later in the later in aphorism of the childbearing, where a woman bears the strong children, which shows Nietzsche's advocacy for eugenics, similar to Plato, where they both advocate for eugenics. If a man can't prevail, overcome, and thrive in excellence inside of himself, he shouldn't beget nor produce children to that same caliber as him, nor seek a woman that's, say, a higher woman, which is rarer and exotic than a higher style of man, due to the dynamic and vast world of both being feminized, while one is being defeminized to substitute in the role of masculinity, which shows that Nietzsche desires a man to be taught of the art of war, whilst the woman is the healer, the elevator, and to simply rejuvenate the man from his time in war, both on a military and aristocratic level. Military, if he volunteers in military applicancy, or his aristocratic spirit or virtues, aka acting to live dangerously. Nietzsche says, well, for believe me, the secret of harvesting a fruitful and vibrant life is to live dangerously. Build your houses on the slopes of Mount Vesuvius, metaphorically, aka, as he said, live dangerously. He includes too that, as I said previously, socialism is anti-biological and it's from the litter of feminism, which, as I said, produces the offspring of democracy and the democratic idiosyncrasy and the negligence of the sense of power or the theory of willpower. As I was saying earlier, socialism is anti-biological, where the classes, chases, and rules become superior from an inferior position, and the once superior old order becomes a vanquished, cunning and liquidiously vanquished society because of adhering to the same level of said state, which is a contradictory of socialism and anarchism, where the fruits of one's will to power as labor is decreased in pain and the maximizing of pleasure. This contradiction occurs once socialism as a stateless, classless, and moneyless society. Is that correct? Stateless, moneyless, classless? Nonetheless, they reinstitute the state to monitor and consume itself. That involves with the femininity and demasculinization of men to become emasculated to what we arrive today. So, what is Nietzsche saying as the role of a woman? To be the healer, the rejuvenator, whilst whilst learning the same as how Kierkegaard or Kierkegaard in English sees philosophy. Stay in your lane. Women don't prefer don't prefer superiority. They prefer submission and inferiority because they'll be discontented if they're thrown in the position of superiority or some form of predominance, which they desire that domain among today. For if the man is a man, to straighten the woman of this overinflated pride, aka injuring and humbling them naturally, to continue the flow of one's ecology. There's other no, it is everything I have to say of that aphorism and my knowledge of what he's arriving at in both of those aphorisms. My name is Gregory Hennigan. Appreciate for watching. I'm Orfati. Love your fate.